Very good. Welcome everyone to the Co-Creators Convergence. This is our call that we have the third Thursday of every month. My name is Noelle Marshall, and here with me is my beloved Bob Warner.
Hi everyone, good evening.
And we call ourselves Light Partners. And we're just thrilled to have our guest tonight. And let me just tell you, let me just first announce what the date is. It's November 17th, 2016. So
yeah, sure.
I always like to get that in. So you know how old this information is. No, just kidding. So anyway, very thrilled to have both Sandie and Regina here. Just give you a little background. I met Sandie when we went to Damanhur this past June. In fact, I got some of my Damanhurian
there we go.
Oh, and Kathy, you got yours? Okay, so we got some of our Selfica jewelry on. And anyway, we just really enjoyed our time together. And Sandie, I found out, knows everyone in the consciousness world, the higher consciousness world, I should say. And I'm a big fan of Gaia, and I'm a big fan of Regina's. And she said, well, would you, if you want, I would ask Regina if she would be on one of our calls. I said, really? And so that's how we have this wonderful evening together. So I'm so excited about it. But before I get into a little bit more about Sandie and Regina, I'm going to turn it over to Bob, and he's just going to do something that we learned in Damanhur. So
You want to mention this first?
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Before I do this, a little opening ritual that we learned in Damanhur, I'd like to make sure that those who have not been on these calls on Thursday evening before know a little bit more about the Co-Creators Convergence. We are a group of evolutionary souls dedicated to co-creating the new humanity inspired by the pure source in each and every one of us. Many of us joined this group assembled the first time because we were students of Barbara Marx Hubbard. And it has grown and grown and grown since that time. And we're very excited to have a community that's as large as it is today. Our intention is to deepen into the emerging consciousness and bring this understanding back home to our communities, to our families, where we live, where we walk on the planet every day. And there are 4 ways to be engaged with the Co-Creators Convergence. One is what you're doing right now, every Thursday of the month. We gather together for this reunion or union call on Zoom, and it's wonderful to see everyone's faces and see everyone's numbers here in spirit. And the second way to connect is on the co-creatorsconvergence.com website. We actually archive all of these calls. We have all of our calls all the way back to the beginning of 2014 archived at that site. And so you're welcome to join us there. We also have a very active Facebook presence, 24/7, where we're interacting with each other. And lastly, the 4th way to get together is when we gather together in the summertime for the Co-Creators Convergence at Sunrise Ranch in Loveland, Colorado. Oh, I got my Sunrise Ranch shirt on today. There we go. And so we gather each summer at Sunrise Ranch. This year will be our 5th time there, and we welcome all of you to be a part of that. This year it is June 1, or next year, 17, it's June 1 through June 4th. Right?
That's right. And the theme this year is Galactic Co-Creation, Ascending with Star Wisdom. And Kathy and Ted and Darlis are going to be co-creating that, but it's always a co-creative event, so everyone participates. It's not a lecture series or teacher in front of the room sort of thing. So, okay, Bob, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you. And, one of the things that we learned in our time in Damanhur was a tradition they have there, and it's been carried on by many others who are part of the Damanhur community here in the U.S. and around the world, and that's a lighting of a candle to symbolize the flame that is the center of so much of rituals and ceremony over the years. When we light a flame, it represents the same flame that's lit around the world and through all of time. It's the same flame that our ancient forebears sat around and told stories. It's the same flame that our grandparents cooked our meals on and our parents' meals on. And maybe it's the same flame that many of us have sat around a campfire and roasted marshmallows. So this is a special opportunity for us to have a candle that's just the gathering of our time together here. So I am going to, with a flame that was brought from Damanhur in our ceremony there, I'm going to light the flame for this evening's time together in this candle. And I would like to share just a thought or two about this. So with your eyes open, for those of you that are on the Zoom call visual, and for those of you that are on the call by phone, imagine the flame of the candle before you. As you gaze into the flame, imagine all the mysteries, the wisdoms, the stories that have come before this moment. Remembering now that when we light the fire, it is the same fire lit around the world and through all time. This flame that connects you to all of the mysteries of the past, all of the mysteries of the present, and all the mysteries of the future. As we greet this elemental flame, we recognize its masculine energy, the hot fire of the sun. We recognize the feminine energy, the cool fire of the moon. This fire, the flame dancing on our candle, is the witness of our gathering and the mirror of the divine spark within. It is our eternal flame. We work in the light of this flame as the eternal flame supporting us in our collective becoming and illumination, of which there will be quite a bit this evening.
So, thank you, Bob. And so we're going to, I just want to tell you a little bit about Regina Meredith. And I'm going to read a little bit from her bio, not the whole thing because that would take the whole 90 minutes. But Regina is a trailblazer. She has many firsts in her bio, which we'll hear about perhaps during our discussion period. But as Regina's career progressed, I think you were originally a reporter doing ski reports. And then the National saw your talent, recognized you, and you progressed through that and ended up in the networks and then NPR. And but then guidance from other realms, from a higher realm, suggested it was time for her to bring her skill set to the world of video and televised. So in late 2004, along with her husband Scott, she co-created Conscious Media Network, the first online network to feature full-length original video interviews with authors and experts in the realms of metaphysical, healing arts, alternative theories, opening up a world that many had experienced but never had access to on this scale. In 2012, Conscious Media Network merged with Gaia TV, which is now Gaia, which Regina currently is serving as anchor in their new media division on Open Minds and Healing Matrix. And also, I recognize you're doing the audio for Deep Space.
Yes.
And we're really enjoying that series as well. So that's a little bit about Regina. So we're very, very pleased to have you with us. And our conduit to Regina is the amazing Sandie Sedgbeer, who we went to Damanhur with. And I just kind of thought this was kind of wonderful. I'm going to read to you just a little sample of what Regina wrote about Sandie. It says, her depth of insight and wisdom is unsurpassed in the area of esoteric knowledge. She is undoubtedly one of the most well-connected people in the field. So that was Regina's endorsement. But Sandie, I know it blew my mind and all the connections. It was so much fun to sit at the breakfast table with her and just, find out about all the people she knew and not just know them, but share what they were about, share their message. So Sandie says about herself, describing how I actually do what I do is not quite so easy. Right, in my unique range of experience playing a significant role. Like after Damanhur, she just popped over to the Bosnia pyramids and then went to London, then came back to to the U.S. and she pops around a lot. But equally, there are other less tangible contributing factors such as intuition, alignment, and resonance. Three transcendent ingredients of alchemy, which, like icing on a wedding cake, are guaranteed to transform something ordinary into something of inestimable value. So I am so excited, thankful, grateful to all of you that have joined us for this evening. And I'm going to turn it over to Sandie, who might want to say just a little bit in introducing Regina. And I'm just going to keep everyone else on mute. And one final thing, I know there are a lot of people that contacted me that couldn't be on this call. It is being recorded, and you can go to our website to pick it up later. We will have the video and the audio there. And we also want to give a warm welcome to all of you who are picking this up at a later time and joining our circle here. And so with that, Sandie?
Well, thank you. What can I say about Regina? Long before she became a dear friend, she was always somebody that I really wanted to know. Her depth of knowledge, the pioneering work she's done, especially in conscious TV programming, really, lit fires within me. And I know that she's interviewed everybody who's anybody in the conscious arena. She is somebody who... Can you hear me?
Having trouble hearing you.
I've got everything as loud as it can be.
Okay, it's good. It's good. It may have been us. Sorry.
Okay, so I won't repeat all that. Regina is the interviewer's interviewer, and she's somebody who I admire immensely. The work that she's done, it is so important as we go through this transition period in, the planet, in our own consciousness, that there are people like Regina who are brave enough to share some of those people who have information that probably other channels might not consider sharing. And the fact that she gave up a very, very successful career as, a network anchor to start Conscious Media Network is really admirable. I'm not going to go on about it. I mean, she's got so much information, and I know that she's going to speak to us tonight about something everybody in the conscious movement is interested in, which is the origin story. And there are many origin stories. Tonight we're going to hear from Regina about the one that she understands. So, Regina, over to you.
Thank you, Sandie. It's good to see you. We live only less than 2 hours apart. I've tried to get with you how many times that you say, I'm on the plane again tomorrow, and you land and I leave. So anyway, it's nice to see you here. Hi, Sandie, and everybody else. Excuse me, I have a tickle and a dry cough, so if you don't mind, every now and then it'll probably express itself while I'm talking. Yes, you're right, Sandie. A lot of people think, with these times we're in right now, who needs to hear about something so completely antiquated in a way, so deep in our history as the origins of the human species? But honestly, it's because of the events that have occurred recently that I find it even more compelling to share that story. And what I'll do is just give a very brief background in terms of where the story came from. It's like most channeled works. Most religious stories are a matter of divine inspiration, channeled works, and so forth throughout history. It's always been that way. This is no different. And in a way, I've sat on it for 30 years. I've been self-conscious about telling this story for one reason. And I know this because Sandie and I have both propagated a lot of it. There are too many stories out there on one, and they're all competing with each other for our attention. And I thought, as dear as this is to me, I don't know that I need to add to the cloud of confusion with yet another story about the origin of the human species. Now, that said, I have spent a good amount of time trying to validate or look at this story through a lot of different lenses, because when it was first shared with me through an obscure channel, a woman who didn't want to channel, she did for a brief period of time. I had access to those beings for quite a long time, for over 20 years, 25 years. But when I met them, I felt like it was the first time I was, number one, being seen, and number two, hearing the truth about anything, everything. So, well, you know, I have a lot of questions about channeled work in general. I'm pretty particular about who I embrace in that arena. On the other hand, you have to go with what has truth for you, what you feel is truth in your own being. And so I embraced this deeply at the time because it just felt right in my cells. Then I started on the process, the journey of trying to find validating information for it. And I went so far as to finally assemble about 2.5 years ago at Gaiam, maybe 3 years ago when it was still Gaiam. I assembled a group, a panel of archaeologists, Vedic scholars, physicists. They're all high profile. I don't need to name their names right now. In any event, I gathered these, they're all men. I gathered them together, and Joan Walker, together to see if I could get a more or less collective view of, or some kind of agreement on the origins of this species. And I found it really fascinating because religion is a difficult topic in general. Belief systems are difficult for scientists, you know, and I always wondered, how does this work where you have a high profile physicist who only goes by verifiable data on one hand, who on the other hand, with abandon, believes in, for example, the Hindu creation story, where you have the world being created out of a lotus blossom from a tummy button. And you think, how are these working within that person? You would think it would create cognitive dissonance. And because even as a little 5-year-old, I just wasn't buying the stories I was being told in the Christian tradition I was raised in. I thought, something's not making sense here. So you could say it's almost been a lifelong journey to try to find an understanding of what we are and why we are, more so why we are the way we are. Why this whole thing happened in America last week with the 2016 election. And the massive amount of pain and fear and panic that has been coursing through the country. I find it perhaps the most insane period I've ever lived in. Very interesting when you see friends, former friends, people who could understand each other and at least come to a meeting of minds, unfriending each other, you know, lobbing grenades at each other verbally. So we're in this time that obviously is calling for revolutionary behavior, revolutionary action, and revolutionary thought. And so toward that end, I wanted to share this story, and I have been at conferences toward creating a deeper level of compassion for ourselves and for one another. And so, Sandie, if you have any questions at this point, let me know. I think about as much setup as it actually needs. No one will find the channel. She doesn't channel anymore. To me, she is still, after all the people I've interviewed, all the channels I've dealt with, that was the highest, cleanest source of information I've ever heard as a channeled source. And so that's why I feel comfortable sharing this with you. Anything you would ask at this point, Sandie?
Right now.
Okay. So I'm going to launch into it. This was pieced together over a period of time because the beings there only answer questions directly. They don't hold court, and they're very austere. So the information was cobbled together by revelations that would happen in one conversation by someone with them, then in another piece here. And then I finally, about 5 years ago, spoke with them and said, this is what I'm understanding about the origin story, and I need to know if there's some connective tissue that I don't understand as per your rendering of this story. And this is what you're hearing now. So there, and I'll just tell it like a story. In the beginning, when the earth was originally forming, you're talking about a density, several dimensions of earth already existed. And there were beings that occupied one of the, what we would probably call a more refined dimension of earth. And they were able to, they were non-physical beings. We would see them as a shimmer of electricity. They were able to, highly intelligent, highly creative. And because there was no physicality, time doesn't work the same way in those dimensions. These beings were able to create at the speed of thought. The only other story about our origins that does connect in with this and more or less directly reference this is Edgar Cayce's work. And it doesn't go very deep into it, but it does acknowledge that there were beings in this other dimension that came and started playing. It's kind of simplified. So I want to flesh that out a bit. As the earth, the physical earth that we know now, was forming, it was going through the normal processes, and the beings were very clear to say there was no Big Bang. That the cosmos is created in a much more orderly fashion. Thought, creation, elements, movement, gases, everything that creates spin rates, everything that we know of in physics today that is used in the creation of the physical world, they said is a reflection of the macro. This is how large systems are created, by beings that have the capability of creating on a very high, massive, intricate level. And each person's belief system, you can call it what you want. You can call it the great creator, you can call it the creator gods, divine intelligence, but the cosmos, the universes, are absolutely saturated with this level of intelligence. Depending on the quadrant of universe you're in, you'll see the expressions according to the creations of these beings. And this is obviously a very masterful level of creation, and Earth and all of its dimensions were no different. And as Earth was going under the creation process, there was a higher rate of frequency it was at in its thought form stages. And you do hear in some texts where they speak about thought form Lemuria, when Lemuria was originally, so to speak, peopled with entities, that it was more in a more translucent thought form stage and began becoming more dense. As the process of creation continued, we had a large variety of life forms, animal forms, plant forms. By the time this whole thing that I'm about to tell you came to be, there were in fact species of animals, including the one that we're now in, this body, that they were clear to say was a very similar vehicle to what we're in right now. It was not an ape. It was not a derivation of an ape. That each of these species that we know of are distinct creations. Neanderthal, it's his own creation, just as the other families of apes were their own creation. And this humanoid species, this particular body that we're in, was its own creation. And it was the most advanced creation at the time that existed on Earth in terms of its capabilities, its mental structure, the ability to use its digits in the way it does to be able to create with the body, with the hands and mind together. So all of these creations were underway, and they were coming into more solid form when the story begins, which is that the beings from another dimension of Earth, these beings that they called the portal beings, and the reason they were called this is because they said Earth, which is why so many different species are interested in Earth, including ETs, as Earth had this anomaly that normally does not exist, which was almost a plasticity between dimensions. And they said it was, though it served as a portal, and normally for the sake of clarity, sanity, whatever you want to call it, dimensions are very clearly defined. You're not, unless you're very psychic, and some of you are, and you're able to see beyond the boundaries of dimension, space, and time, and you can actually see into another dimensional field. Most people can't. It would be very disorienting for living in all of these fields, so to speak, with awareness of all these fields at one time. I mean, for the simple reason that literally an entire universe can be perhaps contained within the palm of my hand, of microscopic, highly intelligent entities. We're bathing in dimensions with other intelligences all the time. So in this case, you have this lovely little, and I'm sure all of you are aware of this, just like dialing in on your radio. You just shift the frequency slightly and you can't hear the other one. You're on to a new one. Same thing. So you're in these dimensional frequency ranges where you're comfortable, that's where you operate, and you're not really aware of the others going on around you. In this case, there was actually this plastic kind of plasticity, permeable area where the beings were able to peer into the creation of what was going on here, which is magnificent. Earth is a magnificent planet. I mean, the level of diversity here, the levels of beauty, potential for experience are just unlimited on this planet. And though my understanding is there are other types of Earths out within the universes, this is still an incredibly beautiful, resplendent planet. And so these beings became curious enough, and again, non-physical. There's no threat of death. There's no mortality in that range. They start simply merging through this area into an exploration, an observation of all of the different life forms that were under construction, that were under development. And this took place over an extraordinarily long period of time. They said there are no words to explain to you how long this process takes to develop a planet with complex life forms. And so these beings, having no mortality, at times irrelevant, over a long period of time, they were coming in simply observing or touching in with energetically, and even then finally merging with some of these life forms. And initially it was, you might say they said you can view it any way you want. You could say they were just playing or experimenting, but in their own eyes, they were seen more as scientists. And there were a lot of them that, which really answered the question of, well, you have an increasing population, where are all the souls coming from? They said there are no shortage of souls to occupy bodies on Earth, and there were no shortage of these portal beings either. And so over a period of time, as they started playing with and merging with the emerging physical species on this planet, they were starting to cause disturbances in the field. They took the experiment just a little bit further, again and again, where they were merging with other life forms and actually causing almost mutations, because the energy was so powerful and really wasn't a fit for simpler life forms. And so you had this dynamic going on. And at the same time, as they started merging with more complex life forms, animal forms, so it wasn't just a tree, and now it's no longer just a fish, for example, but some of the more complex life forms, they took the liberty to begin working with the electrical field, tweaking the electrical field and nervous systems of some of these other creatures that already lived here, so that they could comfortably merge with them. This caused problems. It caused some damage to the DNA, and it caused genetic mutations in subsequent generations. There was some of this going on. It wasn't intended that way. It wasn't malevolent in any way. It was just a simple a lack of understanding of the physical world at all, and a desire to merge with it and see what it felt like to be embodied in something physical. So the problem started when it became, first of all, over this time, the Earth is now beginning to slow in its spin rate. It's dropping down into this third dimensional frequency. And all of the creations here are solid. They're now solid in form. They're not shimmering. They're not thought forms. They're now physical, like what we know now. And as these beings continued merging in with them, they started lowering their own frequency field. If you were hanging out in an opium den for 6 months to a year, your field's going to drop. Your resonance is going to drop. Your frequencies. Same thing. It was a lower frequency band here than where they came from. And the challenge was there was a point in time that came where everyone was aware that was doing this. They had to either go home or stay. There wasn't going to be a choice much longer, because there was too big a disparity between the dimension they lived in and the dimension they were now playing in. And that was going to be sealed off, and not through an edict. It's simply by way of frequency. You couldn't merge either back home, or you wouldn't be able to merge here any longer, and a choice had to be made. Many beings chose to stay here. Many more beings than that simply overstayed their welcome, in the sense that their frequencies were dropping. They were told, if you continue to do this degradation of your field is going to continue, and you will not be able to return home. This was well known at this time. And they stayed anyway. And this became a problem. You had non-physical beings from another dimension now kind of trapped in this third dimensional physical reality with no means of expression, no means of There was nothing they could do. They didn't have a vehicle of their own to be able to express themselves in. And at the same time, they knew that they could no longer continue occupying a variety of species because of the damage that was being caused. And this became well known, certainly throughout our quadrant of the universe. There were extraterrestrial, you would say, third dimensional species that had more advanced understanding of technology, of genetics and so forth, that were well aware of this. Interdimensional beings were well aware of it. We had a spotlight on us because this was something that should have never happened. And now a solution was needed. And what happened was there was an agreement made between the most viable, the most sophisticated and intelligent of the earth animals, and we'll not go into cetaceans, dolphins and whales at this point, but just speaking of earth creatures, land creatures, and the being that looks very much like we look now with the same capabilities physically we have now, was deemed to be the one that would probably work best with this highly creative, highly intelligent electrical being, very creative being. And so an agreement was struck between them that the animal part would serve as a physical home for these electrical beings, and they would carry out the time. No one knew what this would look like, of course, nor for how long, in the physical bodies on this planet. So again, other types of civilizations, people, ETs, interdimensionals and such, came in because there was going to be a fair amount of tweaking that needed to be done to the humanoid body's electrical system and nervous system to be able to handle this incredible amount of wattage, incredible amount of electricity. And so that was with the help of others that these little tweaks were made. And so there was a great time of preparation made before a kind of a more en masse merging took place between these species. And these beings stated over and over to us, you cannot comprehend the magnitude of what happened. You don't take two separate species and squish them into one. You don't do that. It's not done. It's not orderly. It's not how the universe creates. It was out of necessity, and you could say it has now become an experiment. It wasn't intended as that to begin with at all. Nor were we, if you go to the work of Zechariah Sitchin and others, nor were we a slave species. None of that was what was intended. It was simply a matter of practicality that a solution had to be found. So let's continue on that the electrical system, the nervous system, the brain was worked with to be able to handle this amount of electricity and vibration, this level of vibration. So when the time came for the en masse merging, that really becomes the human story. They said it was a very sad thing that happened. It was by and large devastating to most of those souls, because they'd never experienced anything truly physical. They'd never been encased in it. They'd brushed with it, but they hadn't been encased in it. They were just playing. And when the time came for them to merge, the way they described it was the feelings for the electrical being, the portal being, higher dimensional earth being, when they came into the body, they were blown out literally by the senses. They said some of them literally went insane just at hearing the cacophony of sounds that existed within the physical world, the third dimensional physical world. The light pouring into their eyes was so disoriented, it drove some of them literally mad. They couldn't function. The smells around them, all of these, if we can even imagine what it would be like to have never encountered anything like this, and in a flash, basically, now we're encountering all of these things. The information overload, the sensory overload was too much for most of them. They didn't integrate well. The idea was the animal gets an upgrade in intelligence and in creativity, and they have the vehicle to use it well on this planet, and that the being has a home. And so everyone, the hope was that you get the best of both worlds. So you had a very, very capable, very creative, intelligent species that could just start building societies, at the speed of light, in an ideal world. It didn't go that way. The animal portion of this arrangement was completely knocked out by the amount of electricity coming through it, almost disabling them. And there were disabling things that did happen. Some of them couldn't handle the electricity, lost the ability to use their hands and their limbs. Some of their senses didn't work at all. It was essentially individually, each one handled it slightly differently. But overall, it was an unmitigated disaster. And there was no precedent for it. They'd never seen this done before. Even these beings said everyone watched, not knowing exactly what the outcome would be, because it isn't done this way. So what you ended up with was, and this is the critical part, instead of having this lovely higher dimensional mind that can create at that speed and basically has access to all knowledge, which many of you have gone into altered states of consciousness and dipped into this, so you know what it feels like. You're remembering what it feels like as well. These beings, essentially, we're now encased in a mortal being that has a lot of fear, because in a mortal being, you have, of course, the fear of loss of life, competition for food, competition for attention from each other, for land, for whatever, territory. And this was unknown to them. They had no need for competition. They had no need for food. They had to be taught everything, just the basics, because the animal mind, excuse me, the electrical being had its own soul. It had its own subtle bodies. The animal had its own soul, its own conscious mind, its own emotions, mind, and subtle bodies. They both did. You're taking two complex systems and putting them together, and it's competing for dominance. What ended up dominating was the lower animal conscious mind. That's what we work with today. People who meditate, people who have had experiences, of an elevated nature, understand the incredible beauty that goes beyond. Excuse me one moment, I'm sorry. It's really dry and cold here in Boulder. One moment. The animal mind, as our beings, said with a little bit of mirth, not prone to joking, said it was really only to keep you from bumping into things. It wasn't to take over your thought processes and your creative processes. So I think we all kind of understand what happened with that. And then you have the subconscious body in both as well, which is the collective of all the experiences. So you have this elevated being with now encased in a body where the animal's mind has gained dominance, because it has to know its landscape, it has to survive. This was something these beings had never been enslaved to before. So slowly, and some in a flash, they started losing their connection to their home domain and their previous levels of creation. Sandie, speak for a moment while I cough, please.
Fascinating, and it raises so many questions, because how much, what I'm immediately thinking of is how much of that division, is still within us.
Complete. The division is almost 100%. How everyone says, oh, you're this magnificent being that has the ability to, that's true. We are that magnificent being that has that ability. But unfortunately, we can't remember how to access it for the most part. And I think that's where a lot of the really beautiful spiritual principles come in. All that's really happening, it doesn't matter which system you go to, what method of meditation, the only thing that really matters and that's happening is that we're slowly opening the shutters of memory and also access up into what the Hermetics would call the higher mind. The higher mind has been cut off from us. We're living in the lower mind for the most part. And this is a survival-oriented, competitive. That's why as a species, we don't have any problem taking resources from the planet. And now, if we were operating in the other part of our mind, this is totally unacceptable. And in our hearts, we know it. And the people who are waking up know this is completely unacceptable. How could we do this to our host, this beautiful being that we're living upon? Well, it's very understandable to the animal part of our mind. And all around the world, our governments make a practice of it. We allow corporations to get away with it. But something else is speaking to us now. We're not just the animal any longer. And there have been great epochs of history where we wake up. The Atlantean period was one of these. The great, vast, expansive, the Egyptian history, which is not what we understand it as. This is just my most recent understanding of Egyptian history spanned 200,000 years. That means it was well underway while Atlantis was going. Atlantis was well underway when Lemuria existed. Many of these themes were running currently, although that's not what we're taught. We're taught this happened, then it went down, this happened, then it sunk, and then here we were, a few thousand years ago, we popped up in the Middle East. They said it's nothing like that. You had concurrent high civilizations going and then declining, and often through earth catastrophes. And each time that happened, what had been gained in terms of memory and advancement was lost once again. And just as an aside, Dolores Cannon, the late Dolores Cannon, took me through a past life regression one day. And it's in her book, Convoluted Universe 2. She changed my name, but you could read about it there. And it was, I think I was named Veronica or Victoria or something, but it was a blonde TV lady, right? And what it was my final day when this one period, Atlantis went down in 3 different periods. Over the top was the first part to go down, then the middle, then finally the bottom is, and also our knowledge and society disintegrated by that time. It was into a lower state of consciousness. But in the early parts, it was very advanced consciousness. So we were working within the higher mind. We were able to create at very rapid speeds compared to what we're able to do today. It was common knowledge how to use the mind. Today we call them magicians and such, but that's what we're capable of. Everybody's capable of being a magician. That's simply using the creative faculties of the higher part of our own being. It's actually right. And how many people are actually reaching into that versus living out programs that are being fed to us? And the animal, that's easy to feed into the animal because there's fear of survival. So we're living a very split reality. We always have been. And so usually people find comfort in the animal part, how to find together, how to find common interests with people. But we don't really take that lid off that often. And what you're trying to do in your circle of people is you're blowing the lid back off and starting to reach up into the potential of that higher mind that is us, the being part of the human being. So the schism there, the pain that people feel of being so divinely brilliant and capable of great amounts of love and creativity, of great amounts of compassion for one another, of creating great things of beauty and music and artwork. That's not an animal doing that. No other animals are doing that. Even if you can give an elephant a paintbrush in Thailand, they're not doing that. And I love elephants. They're very intelligent, but they're not imbued with the levels of spiritual development, awareness, these incredible peaks of brilliance that the human being is capable of, because we are an anomaly among all the creatures on this planet. And that's not to take away anything from the rest of the animal kingdom. It's splendid with their own levels of beauty and intelligence.
Can I ask a question? These different civilizations, Egyptian, Lemurian, Atlantean, whatever, I mean, were they all this same hybrid being, half animal, half portal being, or were there other dimensional beings coming to this planet at the same time?
Other beings have always been here. Arguably, they were here before we became a human being. When the other humanoid aspect of ourselves, the animal parts, were here, other beings were able, and interdimensional beings were able to come and go. there wasn't a great need for it until this whole thing happened. And then it was almost like a siren call to the universe to bring people in who could help in this integration process with this unique thing that was going on here with these essentially trapped higher dimensional beings in this physical reality. And that brought in many, many kinds, a lot of third dimensional types that were able to work with their technologies in the world of genetics, for example. So when people, you know, in the community I'm in, it's very common to talk about the human species as a genetically engineered species. Well, looking at it from what I've just said, yes, there was a fair amount of help just to try to get these systems to work together. That was the more benevolent side of it. There was a less benevolent side in that when you see a struggling species, if you happen to be exploitive, every kind of species exists throughout the universe. And there were others who did come and did exploit, who maybe did experimentation on the people of certain pockets and regions in a way that was not in integrity, just to see what would happen. I think all of our religious, ancient religious philosophies and the beings, that the mythological creatures that we hear about and we've read about throughout time, I think there is actually a basis in fact for a lot of those highly hybridized beings that were half this and half that. I think that that did occur. There was that level of experimentation as well. And so you have also the integration of the people who came to help with the human species. There you get into Genesis, you know, these great gods were mating with the daughters of men. Well, yeah, happened too. So there was a great amount of chaos, potential for exploitation of this new species during this very long period of time that has been ongoing. I mean, we're not free of it by any means yet.
It seems to me, you know, humanity seems to embody the very best and highest characteristics alongside the very worst and lowest. And, you know, you talk about this division. I mean, you would think that after millennia and also much integration of other species, that somewhere we would have become a bit homogenized into something else. But it feels like that war within us is still going on.
Yes, the war for virtually every human being. And when we, like I said before, to see a species that has the ability for such acts of courage and valor, selflessness, and the ability to create such incredible architecture of anything, technology. We can go on and on about our creative capabilities. And then you see where we fight over a scrap of meat, or, you know, we're devastated because, you know, a mate leaves us and we think we're going to die and we can't survive. Well, that is from that early time. From that early time of living collectively in survival, we needed each other. We really needed each other. Those spheres, the feminine was completely dependent on the masculine for the sheer fact that the male species was larger in size. And that's gone on. The implications of that alone are huge. These little voices inside women that exist to this day, and a lot of this reignited after last week's election, feeling that somehow we were knocked back 50 years in time, that women had finally gotten to where they could start utilizing all of our own creativity, intelligence, all the features every human has at their disposal, and be able to go out and secure jobs, support ourselves, start living independently for what it's worth. And now that has its own big story around that. Yet at the same time, compete on jealous little levels with each other for the attention of men. This is so deeply programmed from the animal part that we need to learn to understand. It's okay. We think, oh my God, I've been doing these spiritual practices. I know how to meditate, you know, I'm a compassionate person. And here I just put my girlfriend down to this man because we both liked him, or something that petty. It happened. And then we feel embarrassed, like, oh, how could I stoop so low, right? And the reality is that That's programmed. That's just programmed for survival. That's the end. And the way women tend to just maybe have this little preference in their hearts for a son over a daughter, expecting a little bit more of the son or a grandson over a granddaughter. I think most women, if they're honest, a lot of this has happened to a lot of people, and they don't even know why. This is deep, deep program and schism within our being. So the reason I resonate so well with this, because most people can feel that kind of schizophrenic way of trying to live within themselves. These two parts competing with each other. You're lucky if you can, not lucky, you've probably worked on yourself if you've gotten to where you're no longer being whipped around by the survival issues of life, and you're able to live a life that's more elevated, more in community, in a solid, a co-creative way, a collaborative way. This is the beauty of it.
Okay. Sorry about that. Regina, this is fascinating. I know there's probably going to be a lot of questions. I was wondering if we wanted to open it up now for some questions. Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm going to, Bob, will you take everybody off of mute? Everyone's
sure. Manage participants right here.
Manage participants. I'm going to unmute
Bottom center.
all.
It's going to be noisy.
Ooh, it might be really noisy. Yeah. If you're not speaking, would you do a *6 or
no, it's just a
manual mute? If you're on the phone calling in, just do a manual mute. We had a little echo there.
Yes, so those that are on Zoom, on your bottom left of your screen, you see a mute button. You can mute yourself. And those that are on the phone, if you just manually mute your phone, that would be wonderful. And unless you're ready to jump into the conversation.
Can I just ask, how would we indicate if we have a question?
Well, you raise your hand.
Yeah, anybody in video can just raise their hands, but
right. And then we'll
this is Nina. You could do it in the chat box too.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
Okay.
But the people on the phone can't do the chat box, Nina.
Yeah. We'll have to.
So we'll keep an eye on the chat box as well.
We'll just look for their box to light up if they start to talk.
And so anybody that's on the phone, if you've got a question or comment and you want to unmute yourself when there's a break in the action and jump into the conversation or question, please do. And then we'll come back to, I know Noelle and I have questions. My response so far is, and so.
Yeah, I've got several too.
Yeah, but
happy to give someone else a chance.
Let me say one thing before we begin. This is not an unheard of story in that you've in all the various stories that talk about the fall of man.
Mm-hmm.
This is just a fleshed out explanation for what that may mean. That's all.
So the fall of man is coming into physicality. Is there
the being, the higher dimensional aspect of our awareness, merging in with less aware animal portion and the immortal reality. We are an immortal being. This created in our own being. You know, we're trying to find our way back to just not be afraid.
Right. Well, I have a question, like, why would those beings, why did they want to stay here? I mean, everything about, you said it wasn't through the Big Bang, it wasn't through chaos, everything was orderly, but then all of a sudden, kaboom, they're like breaking laws and it gets disorderly. So I'm kind of like, why the heck did they want to stay here?
Yeah.
Or, you know, I don't know. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does. The way it was explained is this aspect of us, this other higher electrical intelligent aspect of us, had great curiosity and absolute naivete when it came to the implications of being in the physical realm. It seemed like a good idea at the time. No one had any idea that it was going to play out the way it did. It was actually it was an X factor, and they have said repeatedly through the years, we cannot stress enough how unusual this was, how painful it's been on this species. Many other species are aware. We have guides because we can't connect with our higher mind. Other species don't need that when they're an integrated species. But we have this because of this anomaly, this inability to access the higher mind complex. And so we have guides from whatever realms can work with us individually, working here with people. No one's alone. We all have the help we need to try to open ourselves back up into that. But at the time, it seemed like a really interesting idea until the final time came when it became not a choice anymore. And that wasn't so fun.
Okay. We have a question from Janet Gunn. She says, we have quite a few questions coming in through the chat. That's great. Are we making any progress? Is her question as a species.
I want to share a tiny little thing. I believe in reincarnation. I've been through many, many past life regressions. So this is for me just a normal way of thinking about a progression of a soul continuing to refine itself. I was among some in a lifetime a few thousand years ago. We did try to bring this same knowledge back at that time. And there have been times when we've been aware of our history in higher times on a consciousness scale. We tried bringing it back a few thousand years ago, was the last time it was seriously attempted again, and it did not go well. By this time, the consciousness of the people at large was really quite low. It was really very much oriented toward day-to-day survival, procreation and survival, and being able to vest in one's belief in a birth god or a kitchen god or a rain god. And that was, we had the capability to open up into those simple concepts that there was something else, and if we were good, they'd help us, or we'd get whacked if we were bad. And we tried to bring this knowledge forward, but it landed on infertile ground. It did not go well for anybody involved. It was bad. And so it wasn't time. But in early Atlantean times, it was understood, and it was an easy thing to accept because everyone was fully aware of the schism within our species. And so I would say the reason it's coming out again, and I talked to the beings and said, I'm thinking of sharing this story now more publicly. And they said, the time has arrived where the consciousness is sufficient to begin examining these things once again. So that indicates to me, just that simple little thing, aside from what we see, that we are a more evolved species than we were even 100 years ago. We might, you remember people used to go for kicks and watch lynchings. We're not really that brutal. Most of us are not that brutal and could never tolerate such a thing now in our emotional body. Our hearts couldn't stand that kind of cruelty where that was possible. Whole towns showed up to watch a beheading a few hundred years ago. So I think we're making progress. Definitely.
Thank you, Regina. We have another question come in from Kathy Mason. Do you agree with the law of one material?
I have to be honest. I had someone that may be known to others, a man 20 years ago, find me and come by my house. And he said, I would like you to pick up this material. And he handed me this little spiral bound book called The Law of One. And you're going to be shocked to hear my response. I started reading through it. He left. I started reading through it and I thought, I'm not resonating with this, and I left it alone. So I'm a terrible person to ask that of because I did not choose to go into any in-depth study of it. So I would have to say that in that sense, I wasn't resonating back then with it. So I chose to let it go. And I've thought since then, what happened to that book? Because I have massive, massive numbers of books and I can't find it. And I was trying to remember the man's name. I remember what he looked like. And honestly, I have to say, I didn't pick it up. I didn't run with it. So I'm a bad person to ask.
We'll forgive you for that. No. Okay. We do have another question come in here from Allison. She said, I survived this war. What a wonderful creation, mythos. Living this tradition out, this mythos makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you.
You're most welcome. And the reason I tell it is because I want each that resonates with this to understand we need to extend huge amounts of compassion to ourselves. We've all been through this journey. We're all living within this schism, angel and sinner, so to speak. I don't believe in the word sin, but we're living in this dichotomy all the time. We're having these impressions from the outside forced upon us to manipulate us, and we are, because of this problem within, I won't say problem, because of the schism within our psyche, we're very subject to impressions, hypnotic trance, all of this. We're very easily led as a species because of this trauma that is, and there's nothing more to call it than flat out trauma. This being has been so incredibly traumatized. We're very easy to program. And there are those who would like to exploit that. And I think most people here know what that looks like or feels like to be exploited. We're being exploited in mass all the time. And it's really up to us to start waking up, listening to the higher whisper of our more divine aspect, not more divine, but in more refined aspect, and start unplugging from these external messages. That's the most damaging thing, holding us in this place of incongruity.
Fascinating. Well, I just feel privileged to be at this point, that you're sharing this with us. And we do have some more questions here.
Sandie has a question, and then there was someone that was speaking up by phone, I think. So Sandie, go ahead with yours, and whoever it was that was on the phone.
I think that's area code 208. We'll get to you next after Sandie.
Go ahead, Sandie.
Okay, this is a question and an observation. Question first, Regina. When the portal beings, did they have gender? Or was that only when they merged with the animals? Because one of the things that we're seeing now with our youth, I mean, it's been happening, probably over more and more. We've become aware of it more and more over the last 40, 50 years. Transgender, many of today's youths refuse to be categorized as one gender or the other. And I wonder if that is some kind of evidence of our evolution of rising consciousness, that this is who we really are, and these kids are expressing it.
I think that's an excellent question. I mean, I think it's such a highly individual choice that a person makes on one hand, but the argument could certainly be made that they're going back to more of an essential aspect of their nature that moves beyond gender identity, and the souls were not engendered, so to speak, before coming into this process of splitting off into male, female for the propagation of the species on the planet. It became a necessity. And yet with that, interestingly, and I find this a fascinating topic, because if you look into the Hermetic knowledge and other ancient bodies of knowledge, everything within the universe is masculine or feminine, right down to the simplest thought form creation. You have the medium, the prima materia, and then you have the inspiration or information breathed into the medium, which you could almost look at as the act of physical procreation even, that sparks something of a creative nature. The masculine is considered the spirit of breath, and the mater mother is considered the prima materia, in which all things start taking seed. So on that level, there's really almost nothing we can look to on this earth that isn't male and female or female in its expression. So when you look at it through that lens, you say, then I'm confused. I don't get it. Because that is the physicality of the physical world, and it out to its most finite level. So it's a complex question, but I think that what you're saying is to just begin merging with the nature of our true essence would move us beyond sexuality or gender identity, and maybe that is what's occurring.
Yeah,
at least in part. Yes, good question.
Thank you.
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Could you just say your name and where you're calling from?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Darren Coates from Idaho.
Hi, Darren.
Voice of Christmas past.
Oh boy.
Yeah. I just want to speak for a moment. I've been meditating at a high rate for the last few days, and something just told me to do this today. And that story that Regina is saying is totally authentic. And I know that. For some reason, in my area of energy, I see interior, I don't see exterior much, and it's been confusing most of my life, but now I've accepted it because I've went into myself, and when I go around now, I see people, I see their interior, and it's very unconditionally loving to me, so I can coexist here. Before, I was very frustrated because it was an exterior world, and now it's become an interior world, so I enjoy the exterior part of it, and I seem to love everyone I come in contact with. And I'm so grateful for Regina sharing that story because it resonates with me at a high, high rate. Thank you.
You're so welcome. And what a beautiful way to be able to live, to have opened into the higher aspect of your own being and carry it through into the physical world. That's kind of the Holy Grail. That's what everybody's waiting for. That's what other beings that are watching this species, wondering what's going to become of us. That's the hope, that we'll be able to do the kind of integration that you've been through. And
yeah, and it is going on, because for me, I see it happening, and then it happens, and my frustration, which I do not believe in, I do not go there, but the frustration of the world is they can feel it, but they don't know how to do it. It's like, I don't know how to pick up the fork, and I go, you just look at the fork and it feeds you. I don't know how else to say it. It's just been happening at a high rate. And your energy, whatever you're putting off, elevates mine at a high rate. Because I don't do these calls. I don't. And Bob knows this. And I'm a really oddball that way, but I could not call.
Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing your own experience of this process of integration in your own life. It's absolutely beautiful, and it's inspirational to all of us. And the reason I tell that story, first of all, it's the only story I've resonated with completely in all of them I've been told. Like I said, even this think tank with the most brilliant men, there was no cohesion. There was no consensus or understanding of the origins of the species at all. And so I thought, okay.
I so agree with you.
Yeah. So I realized I believe so deeply in what this means, the implications to humankind with this story, that I'm going to pick it up and run with it. And so that's what I've started doing. And this is probably only the maybe fifth or sixth time I share publicly.
But the frequency that you're on is very accurate.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to have, I always love to have any kind of verification on this, because the last time I did this a few thousand years ago, it didn't go well. And I've had good reason not to speak up since then. So yeah, for me, it takes a little courage to step up and say, okay, I'm going to tell you another one. You might think it's a whopper, but feel inside your heart and see if it's true for you.
Good. Okay. I just have a question. We do know Darren. He's been to our Co-Creators Convergence twice. And Darren, did you have this? I know that you shared with us that you had a near-death experience. And did you have this awareness before or after that, or is that just not related to it at all, your experience?
No. I came to the planet this way, but I buried it because nobody would listen to me. And then my near-death experience opened it up again, and I have to be that way now.
Oh, I'm on an interesting webinar call.
There's someone who needs to mute themselves. They're talking about being on an interesting seminar.
I don't know how they are.
which I agree with. Okay. Hey, Tom.
Everybody get it.
Let me
There you
mute him.
There you go.
Okay.
Pamela, did you have a question or join?
Not at this point, Bob.
No, I do actually have one bubbling up. Kind of along the lines of Janet's, you've answered beautifully about this time that we're in, and this time that's being spoken about as a time of ascension. And so are we at an accelerated place where we can access more of that higher self and merge with our higher guidance and heal that schism? Is that why we've come? That's what it feels like.
I think you're absolutely right.
Ding, 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 ding. That's what it feels like to me. So
big. if there's a reason to continue incarnating on Earth, it's to be able to bring together into harmony this full possibility of what it is to be a human being. Because many of us are kind of trapped in this, you know, the feeding of the subconscious, the DNA that we lay down in our tribes, the karma we create through our activities and actions and beliefs, all of this, we keep coming back, trying to tweak it, correct it, and somehow make it just a little bit more harmonious within ourselves and between ourselves. So I can't think of any higher purpose of why we would continue doing this crazy thing other than to fulfill the original intention of what it is to be a human being. And other beings throughout the universe are very curious about us. We have free will. Add this schism, this almost schizophrenic behavior within us to a free will to that. And now we're looking at a really interesting dynamic, because free will doesn't play out the same way in most places. And I think partially because when you have a cohesive species, and you start learning what works, what doesn't work, society knows how to organize itself, and free will isn't even necessary in the same way after a period of time. But wow, look at what happens here due to free will. I mean, we become addicted to the drama of it, but the potential of it is absolutely stunning.
Hi, Regina. This is Bob, and then I'm going to read a question from Janet when I'm finished. I was very interested when you were talking about the portal beings and that time of connection and whatnot, and that you mentioned that they were blown out in their first experiences with the senses that we in animal form have. And I'm recalling from our trip to Damanhur and spending time with Betsy Poole and learning more about the story of the real. And I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but part of the Damanhurian belief is that at one time on this timeline of humanity, we actually had more than 5 senses. We had many more than 5 senses. And so I was just wondering if you're familiar with that at all, that were the portal beings, were they exposed to something more than the 5 senses that we know?
Or do they have other senses we don't have?
Right, yeah.
Right. Certainly the capabilities in sensing the other dimensional being is beyond what we understand. It's more fine, less dense, physical 5 sensory reality we're in. And because I don't know the Damanhur teachings, I don't know the context for it, but that would make sense to me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, you want to read Janet Gunn's question?
Janet Gunn in Denver. So what do we need to know so we don't end up back to the bottom like Atlantis? I think we need to know the story.
I think it's very important for us to know what we are, and to have the advantage of knowing what we are, having the grace to not continually beat ourselves up over this and diminish our own value on this planet, because we may be struggling between these 2 poles of our understanding and our behavior in life. Number one, know what we are, know what we're capable of. And number 2, making a commitment to opening up the communication between the lower survival animal mind, what we call the conscious mind, and the more sublime higher mind. And remember, this isn't what it used to be. We are now a hybridized being. So the higher mind we came in with isn't the same higher mind complex we have now, but it still has these vast capabilities to reach out into the all. And so our commitment to connect up with our own higher self is the most important thing I think we can do. Because then if there is some kind of disaster that befalls humanity, we're not blasting ourselves back to the Stone Ages again. We're still able to, if we choose to continue incarnating here, come back with that established contact already having been made, and we start at a higher level. Does that make sense? It's
Yeah,
the number
Janet.
one. This with ourselves is the number 1 priority.
Okay. I have a question. There's a lot of talk about disclosure, full disclosure. How would that impact this story?
Well, it doesn't. I don't think it impacts that story in and of itself. As you know, I've done work in that area for the last certainly 13 years. I was present at the original disclosure in Washington, D.C., when it actually did happen in May of 2001. And I know a lot of the players involved in it, and I know that there are a lot of competing forces. When we're looking at the subject of disclosure, you have to understand what's in it for each of the parties involved. You can never look beyond. I mean, you can't underestimate the power of that question, because we are having contact with other ET civilizations. Some of them may be a little more usurious, some a little more benevolent. So who's speaking and what is the ultimate objective? So it's like follow the money, you know, it's like follow the agendas and follow who benefits from this. In terms of disclosure itself, one would argue, I always argue, it's already happened. We know things. When Stephen Greer got all of those gentlemen from the military and civilian aeronautics and such together in that amazing event, which I attended back then. And I used to go out in the field with Stephen Greer, and we would, you know, communicate, and we would use our remote viewing skills to see what was coming in and where. And I joined in that process. It's exciting. It's fun because it's the unknown and everything. But in terms of, you know, a formal, unified disclosure, Danny Sheehan, and I know you watched the interviews with Danny Sheehan recently, he would say they have something like a 50-year timeline on rolling it out for humanity. And everyone says, why so long? Most people believe we're not alone in the universe. Well, it's very complicated because you're looking at politics, technology, the infrastructure of our governments, our religions would be overhauled. There's a huge implication to humanity if everyone suddenly understood. We not only we've been visited, I mean, in a sense, we even have some of that DNA in all of us, you know, so it's a very complex topic. I would say I'm not waiting for the government to tell me anything. I've already met with all the guys anyway and interviewed most of them. They've already told me their stories. That's disclosure enough for me. I do understand that. And then my own experiences in seeing them and seeing their craft and dealing with interdimensional beings in meditation time. I don't find it maybe as intriguing anymore as I used to, for one reason, and that is, where's the usefulness in it to us? For the most part, it is titillating. It is, for some people, a little bit frightening. And for others, it's hopeful because there's a belief that ETs are somehow going to save us. No, they're waiting. Everyone's waiting for us to stand up, live into who we are, and take back this place for ourselves. This is our planet. This is the planet of the human being. And not only that, it might be interesting to note, according to George, I love his work. He's been long dead. And also even Corey Goode, who I interviewed recently, and the beings he speaks with. This humanoid form is one of the most common forms of beings throughout the universe. Being a human looking like us is not exclusive to Earth at all. Many other planets have beings like us. So, you know, you can look at it on any level you want, but I would say disclosure has already happened. It just may not happen the way people would like it to, like in the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Okay, thank you, Regina. We have one more comment here from Lynn Francis. She says, how do we know what we are and apply this while working in the corporate world? It seems easier to do when working in the arts. I have done both.
Okay, you broke up on me, so I didn't hear the
Okay,
question.
all right, I'm sorry. All right, and then we'll go to Ted after that. Lynn asked, how do we know what we are and apply this while working in the corporate world? It seems easier to do when working in the arts. I have done both, she says.
Yeah, I think that that's where having some kind of a personal practice, even if it's not a day-to-day formal meditative practice, to be able to go out into nature and to listen to the subtle signs and information that are permeating us from everything around us all the time is part of what takes us back into our union with self, because everything has this incredibly divine imprint in and around it. The entire world of nature is here to help us remember, to balance ourselves. We were drawn to this place because of nature, and we cut ourselves off from it. So I think that's one way to do it, is just make sure you take a little walk every day, listen to the birds, start feeling your way into the subtle voice that's always speaking to you. And this is what we don't do. We allow the conscious mind to override these subtle feelings. The way back home is to listen to those subtle little voices on our shoulder that are from our own higher self, and start saying yes to them. That's a big one. Not questioning them, dissecting them, putting it into an analytical arena, but just saying, yes, okay, I hear you. I'll try that. And that's where the whole complex begins to open up to itself, is by saying yes. So corporate or art, it doesn't matter.
Okay. All righty. And Ted has a question there in Boulder. Ted?
Hi, Regina. I love your aspect of ascension, and I think that's what we're all looking for, both on a planetary and an individual basis. We're co-creators. We love the idea of how collectively we can be more powerful and more effective than just as an individual. And so how do you recommend that the group collective, as we work on our own individual, at the same time collectively trying to raise the vibration, and at the same time inspire others to wake up and start to raise their vibration as well?
Well, I'd say you're doing it right this minute. And every time you do this, where you gather together with like minds, and then you take the information that seems dear and true to you, and you start expressing it and living it out into the world, and you choose to selectively share it where you feel there's fertile ground, that is the process. That is how we do it collectively. One little seed transported from one to another, and ultimately wherever you have the luxury of coming together in group, whether it's virtual or not. And the reason we started Conscious Media Network was literally, my idea was so people would have conversational salons around it. They would watch the videos together, and whatever subject intrigued them, because it's all about just opening to other possibilities, and start having conversation and dialogue around it, and then maybe taking it out a little further. So I'd say that just being here now, and like you are together as a group, is the beginning of that. You are co-creating this new reality simply by showing up, feeling and sharing, and then taking it outside of your little pod to the outside world and planting seeds there. That's the best we really can do.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay. All right.
Elizabeth would like to have a question if we still have time.
Yeah, go ahead, Elizabeth. Well, let me just hold on a second. I've got other questions. Darlis has a question. Linda has a question, but I want to talk to Regina. What is your time?
Yeah, just put me in the queue.
Thanks. Okay.
I'm okay for a little bit longer. Pretty soon I'll have to use the restroom, but
well, wait. I'm just kidding.
You can't hear me.
All right. Okay. Well, Elizabeth, why don't you go first, and then we'll have Darlis, and then we'll read Linda's comment. So let's go with that order. You got the mic.
Okay. Thank you, Regina. It's wonderful to hear your wisdom here tonight. Thank you for sharing with us. We share a watershed. I'm also from Lake Tahoe.
Oh.
Grew up in Squaw Valley.
Oh yeah, love it.
And that lake taught me something about water. And as everybody who knows me in this group knows, that has been sort of my piece that I'm bringing to the world. And as I see it, humanity has removed and separated themselves from the water cycle of life, and that is one of our basic dysfunctional traumas. And so I wonder if the mention of water, which is everywhere in the universe, and I believe has a key part to play in the formation of planetary bodies, if water is at all mentioned in this creation story.
No, only in terms of that it exists on this planet and was created as part of the complex, but they never actually, and that's because no one asked about its role within us, other than they will say repeatedly, the salts in the water in the body act as conductors for all of the information and energy flowing through. And so the role of water is part and parcel to not just life itself, but to our consciousness. And if you look at the bodies of water, we just think of, too many people, not you obviously, think of water as being some kind of inert substance that we need to hydrate plants and people. No, the bodies of water on this planet are constantly being programmed with celestial information, information from the earth, information from the cosmos, information from beings of vast proportions. The waters here, the easiest thing to program, which is why homeopathy is so effective, is the waters of our being and our body. So to have really clean water that we not only take into the body, but to be in connection with the natural flowing waters of the earth, absolutely is an enhancer to raising our own frequencies, raising our own voltage and our capability of reaching up higher into ourselves. I totally agree with that.
Thank you. The one woman that asked about a practice, or you suggested a practice with, being in the corporate world. Keep a bowl of water on your desk.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a connection point to nature.
Yes, good. That's good. And a little fountain, ideally, even a little bit of moving water. Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier today, I watched your show with Tamarack.
Yes, Tamarack Song.
Tamarack Song, and it's all about this. He's so connected to nature, how to be nature, and
yes.
So I highly recommend that interview. And he was really an interesting guy.
Beautiful. I would recommend it too. Thank you for bringing that up. Actually, who came up today, because I'm the last to know. Gaia doesn't know we're putting on Thursdays until I usually find out other people, unless I go on and look it up myself, is what interview's on today. So I'm glad you found that.
That's kind of funny. Okay.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And we're going to go now to Darlis. And go ahead, Darlis.
Thank you so much, Regina. I just want to say thank you so much. And we are who we've been waiting for. And and I'm just really excited by what's happening the last few weeks. I've just had this renewed energy from the whole thing, because this is the moment we've been waiting for. So thank you so much. Thank you for tonight. Thank you for coming here and being with us all. And we have been in community for a long time, and it feels really, really good. Yeah. And I just want to do a shout out to Darren, my brother, who I miss dearly. And Darren, we need you at this year's Convergence, please. It's June 1 through 4th at the ranch. So this is my shout out for you to please be with us this year.
No more hiding.
I will. I will.
And I'm going to do a shout out and say it'd be great to have Regina with us. So we're going galactic this year. And I also want to just give a shout out for Sandie. I don't know if any of you saw that I posted her interview that she did about how to interpret what just went on, the spiritual interpretation of the election. And I did enjoy that, Sandie, and that was posted in our co-creators Convergence. So
this one right here.
Okay, someone is echoing there. I don't know. Okay, I think we're going to do one more. One more comment, and then we're going to have Pamela is going to tell us about who's going to be on our call next month, and it's going to be poets. We're going to have some beautiful poets. So, but first, I'm just going to say, Linda from Alaska, this is our closing question. Where does divinity fit in?
Divinity is part and parcel to everything. It permeates all. So there's nothing less divine in the animal part of us than there is in the more refined part of our, creative and intellectual aspect. The electrical part of us, it is all permeated and awash in the same divine frequency. So it's not fair to put one aspect of ourselves above the other. It's all the same in that respect.
divine. Yes. So I just want to take a moment now. Bob, do you want to join in here? And just want to thank you, Regina, so much for taking this time. It kind of blew my electrical circuits when Sandie said, yeah, I'll ask Regina to be on the call. So I was like, what? And I do want to let you know that when we do get together at our co-creators convergence, you know, we have a plan, and then things happen, and the energy that we generate there together is really quite amazing. And so we'll send you information. You happen to be in Boulder, even if you just want to. We're going to have one night. I don't know. Have you ever been out to Sunrise Ranch?
I fly in.
I didn't get that.
When I come to Boulder, all I do is work. I do a lot of interviews, and the donuts really gotten to know the area.
Well, we'll have to give you a little tour out there on our 350-acre organic farm. Sandie, you too. And we're going to have a night in the dome, a 400-person Buckminster Fuller design dome that we have, and we're going to be inviting the public just for Friday night, not for the whole thing. And so maybe that's something you'd want to plug into to share this story, and just you know, you'll find a very receptive audience to spread the word. I'm quite sure.
You can get the information to me so I can see if I can slot it into my travel schedule. That would be great.
Okay, fantastic.
And
thank
you for giving me the opportunity to share my beloved story with everyone, and I hope it has found some place of resonance. If it's
it has.
Wonderful.
And thank you, Sandie. Sandie says she has to jump off. Thank you, Sandie. Let's give her a wave, everyone. Just thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Regina. Thanks, Noelle and Bob.
And we'll see you in Colorado too.
You will.
Oh, yay. Okay. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to turn it over to Pamela. Would you like to tell us what's coming up next month?
Honey, I'm going to, because I really have to use the bathroom now.
Bye. Thank you, Regina. Thank you so much.
Let's give her a wave. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay. Appreciate it.
Yes. Oh, that was brilliant. So inspiring. So,
Let's do it again next month. What do you
Next
say,
month.
Pamela?
so Thursday, December 15th, that's the date, right, Noel and Bob? We are going to be having a virtual Wild Woman Council Fire with Ingrid Enzo and Allison Nappy. We're calling it Awakening to Our Wilder Grace. And both of these women, it's interesting. I was introduced to Ingrid years ago, and then her partner said, you need to meet this woman, Mila Popovich. And the story you all know is that Mila and I met last year in the physical under the dome, and she danced and I sang, and that was the beginning of that particular co-creation. So when we started putting these dates out, and you said, Mila and I invited us to co-create for December, we immediately both thought we would like to invite Ingrid, and she shared one of her poems as well. So Ingrid is going to be joining us from Oslo, Norway, where it's going to be 2:30 in the morning, but she's a bit of an interesting bird and will have a long nap and come up like the owl and arise to meet us. And the beautiful, blazing poet, Allison Nappy, who I met on Facebook. We haven't physically met yet, but I have a feeling we will soon too. I came across Allison on Facebook and literally fell into her words with a hunger and a knowing. And honestly, her poems are these soaring trumpet calls that go right to your core, as do the beautiful words of Ingrid. So I feel like this council fire that we're creating, bringing in Ingrid from Norway, and Allison is currently touring the US on her Wildness tour. So when Mila and I were talking, you know, get ready for 4 of these blazing women. I don't know, there's going to be like pop, 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 pop all over here. But we came up with these phrases when we talked the other day. rewilding of the divine feminine, and the voicing of the new divine feminine. So this is what came to me when I wanted to put something together. This divine duo will open the gates to your undefended heart with poetry, prophecy, and the pure potency of the wild woman's wily and witty ways of wonder and knowing. This is the new powerology. We will hear the voicing of the new divine feminine. Come to be washed clean of the weariness of a tired and tarnished world, and be polished by these poet prophets who carry the promise of our remembered radiance and will help us bring it home to heal ourselves, our beloveds, and the world. Yeah, baby. So please join us. It's going to be amazing. Both of these women have lived incredible. When Regina talks about that schism, I know Ingrid's story well. I know a little bit about reading about Allison's, and they both have lived. Oh, she's howling with delight. I love this. They both lived from a place of a mythos of deep trauma and have come out the other side taking no prisoners. And they are here to forge a way where we know, man, woman, and child, who and what we are, what we're here to do, and to wake us to our core with body poetry, with word song that is going to awaken us to a divinity from which we will never go back to sleep. Aha. Amen.
Wow.
So,
Shucks, Pamela. I think I'm going to show up.
join us and spread the word.
Wow.
A few poems shared, and we have to talk about format, but Mila and I are thinking we want to share a poem too. Or we're allowed as hosts, right?
The format is whatever you want it to be.
Okay.
The format is whatever you want it to be.
It'll be a tapestry of weaving, gold threads of, we'll weave it all together, and it's, so. That's
Beautiful. Allison is on the line, and if she wants to, she sent us a little chat. If you want to just voice in here.
Whoops. She might have just popped away.
Hello.
Oh, there.
There she is. Hi, gorgeous.
Oh my goodness, and my heart is beating really fast, and my breath is caught in my chest a little, and I'm God with you, as Mila would say. I haven't seen you in at least 10,000 years, and this is so exciting.
Oh, I'm having a hot flash. I have to take a layer off.
I know. An animal of the body. It's actually quite intelligent once you get to know it.
For those of you that are only on the phone tonight, next month you'll definitely want to be on Zoom.
Yeah, it's so nice to meet you. I've never laid eyes on you, but through John, I know he introduced to my poem Into the Void, and then we met like 2 years ago just through that chat box, and welcome. Can't wait to have you on the call.
Yes, and Allison, I think we have an appointment with you in June as well, June 1 through 4.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
You got it.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank everyone. This has been an amazing, wonderful call, and some people had to jump off and send their, from Nina, she says, great big the blood at CCC. Thank you, everyone. And I just wanted to say my heart is so full. And Bob, did you want to say
Absolutely.
anything?
And there are a number of you that are with us tonight. Richard, Carrie, Lynn Francis, that their names are not familiar to us from our circle here. And we're so happy that you're with us. And there may be a few others on the phone.
Well, Barb was on.
And so we really invite you to be a part right away of our Co-Creators Convergence Facebook page, and continue to join us on the third Thursday of the month as we go forward together.
So, okay, Darlis, go ahead.
And Richard is here tonight, and he's going to be the speaker for January.
Oh.
I wanted to do a shout out to Richard, and if you would like to hop on for a minute and say hello to everyone.
Yeah, welcome, Richard. You got the floor.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can. You bet.
Indeed. Well, in January is going to be really pivotal. 2017 is an extraordinary year. It's a number 10 year. And because it's a number 10 year, it's the beginning of all the shifts that have been happening with energies on the planet. This year, 2016, is the year of freedom, whereby a lot of people are feeling that when they flow with the energies of what's happening in the planet, they can actually free themselves from the matrix and all humdrum of the 3D world. And a lot of people are actually going through the, I won't say the pain, but the turbulence of doing that. Because when you free yourself from the 3D world, there is some discomfort going on, etc., particularly when you want to let go of attachments, etc. In January, I'm going to be talking about a topic that's, to my knowledge, is little unheard of, and it's called group communion with ETs. Because one of the issues that we've had on the planet is that we look upon ETs as aliens, and this is the way the media and how everything has portrayed for us, that they're separate from us, there's something to be feared, they're unknown, they're not part of us, and and Hollywood has portrayed aliens as beasts that eat us up. And actually, that's only very minutely true. There are only a few species that are like that. But the vast majority of species of aliens, ETs, are just like us, universal citizens, universal beings. So what group communion with ETs is about is, first of all, tapping into the principle that we are all one. Now, when you tap into the principle we are all one, you actually have to go from head into heart, into spirit in an integrated fashion for you to actually get the full knowing of that. Because if you just think oneness in your head, then one is still in the illusion of oneness, not the reality of oneness. And so what I'm talking about is being able to actually partake in communion. Now, communion is a sacred union, a sacred joining. It's a bit like what the Christians do when they have the Lord's Supper, when they partake of communion. Now, we can actually do this with our ET citizens and family. And the sacred event in terms of communion is all about doing something that we all want. They do, we do, everybody does. And that is partaking in the shift of this planet from the third to the fifth dimension. We're talking about the new Earth.
That's what you're going to be going over with us in January.
Yeah. That's exactly correct.
Okay, cool. All righty. I know that there's many people that had to jump off. I don't mean to cut you off, but I know it's been a long call. And I just want to thank you. I'm excited about what we're going to learn from you and to meet you in June. So
that'd be a pleasure.
Yay. So thank you everyone for being here. It's been a wonderful, amazing call. I'm going to have to replay it because I didn't get it all.
Ted took notes. Ted took notes of Regina.
Thanks, Richard. We love you.
Bye.
Cool.
Richard, can't wait to see you.
Mwah. Love everybody.
See you tomorrow night, Janet.
Bye, Janet.
Good night.
Bye.